the arrival of the sound to our ears. Buddham saranam gacchami, Dhanam saranam gacchami, Sangham saranam gacchami. Paying homage to the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. To the joy of the practice that we can take this opportunity to settle ourselves away from busy activities of our day. Calm ourselves from the busy activities of our minds somewhat. Bring our hearts, bodies, and minds together in this place of Sangha. In gratitude to the Buddhas showing us the way of awakening, and of the Dhamma, the truth of the way things are, that we can see clearly from direct experience, and to the Sangha, our own right here, and all those others around us and who have gone before us, allowing us this opportunity in this precious human birth to have the opportunity to seek freedom from suffering. Letting ourselves begin in whatever way is most comfortable and familiar for you. It helps to let a little wave of relaxation flow through the body, relaxing around the eyes, the face, and the jaw. Letting the shoulders relax, letting the spine stay relaxed yet upright, our bones sitting on top of each other. Feeling gravity at our buttocks and perhaps at where our feet are if we're sitting in a chair. That we can use this body and this breath as an anchor for our practice. When we want to return, if the mind is wandering too much or hindrances have come in and shown us their faces, we can return when we come back again to an awakening moment, to the object of the breath or the sitting on the cushion or holding ourselves in kindness with a kind of softness, a pliability of the heart. Letting loving kindness and compassion be our support system as we see where clinging can sometimes lead us, and letting go of that clinging that might be unskillful. Whether we start from the anchor of attending to sensations in the body, of breathing at the nostrils or pressure in the diaphragm, breathing at the belly, or whether we start with a more open awareness of the entire body breathing and having the container of the body from which we notice what arrives purely at the sense doors. Whether we have a single object or whether we have changing objects that we are noticing with mindfulness and awareness. Seeing clearly the arising and passing away of what comes into our awareness. Whatever arises is good practice. And we can also bring into this mix what is happening in the mind right now. What is the attitude of the mind right now? Arising and passing away, attending to what is present, awakening in the moment or beginning again. Gently placing that awareness on our bodies and minds of not too tight, not too loose. This fundamental loving kindness for ourselves. When we lose our attention span or get lost in one of the hindrances of sleepiness or restlessness or grasping and clinging, pushing away, doubt, we can just gently see this hindrance arising. And if we want to gain a little more concentration, we can just come back to the breath, begin again. Notice as clearly as possible, beginning in the middle and the end of each breath. Knowing right then when we notice that it's a moment of awakening because we are in the present, we are seeing something arise and pass away on its own accord without our controlling it or willing it. Impermanence right there and then. And the understanding that whatever's arising cannot be clung to, cannot be grasped onto. We can't hold on to it. It is not personal. And when we do grasp, that creates some momentary suffering, sometimes more subtle than others. But it's this direct experience that the Buddha taught. The handful of leaves, the small amount of information really needed to know to access freedom. It's just our interest and our amount of confidence in the practice and our amount of effort, just enough to be interested, continue having interest in what's happening this very moment. And we can do this sitting. We can stand up and gently activate our bodies to a different position. We can walk in the practice. Whatever it takes to stay interested, awakening again to each moment. moment by moment, moment by moment, waking up to where we are right now. Maybe noticing the feeling tone of pleasant or unpleasant, or we can't really tell. That can keep us sometimes from going into a long storyline of proliferating thoughts to perceive and define what's happening. If we just notice the feeling tone. Knowing that there's a preciousness in this practice, a goodness in this practice that brings joy to our hearts and minds, no matter what's going on. It's an act of caring for ourselves and others. Letting go of ill will if we see it arise. Nurturing loving friendliness and compassion. Letting the mind incline towards skillful and letting go of unskillful. We can even notice when there are not thoughts of ill will, when we are free from that kind of nonviolence. Rather than just noticing sometimes what might be thought of as our negative emotions, we let whatever arises arise and pass away, and let wisdom and awareness investigate and notice when the mind is free from ill will, when we can develop kindness, compassion, and the generosity of letting go of what doesn't serve us. Beginning again whenever we need to. What is happening right now? Is there coolness at the nostrils or warmth at the nostrils? Is there pressure, warmth, heat at our buttocks on the cushion or our hands where they're touching? Do we feel pressure at the diaphragm? Or do we notice what's happening at a sense door? Letting that be our object of attention, of hearing or tasting, seeing, touching, the thought door. Gently letting our awareness be grounded in the anchor of the body, sitting on the cushion, not too tight, not too loose. Intention in our minds. Inclining from time to time, reminding ourselves in our understanding of the Eightfold Path, of the right understanding. We can remind ourselves of understanding what we're doing, why we're doing it, and how this practice of mindfulness relates to the rest of our lives. Beginning again, waking up in the present moment. We're paying attention to and illuminating what arises so that we can really understand the way things are. We're turning on the light in a darkened room. We can see directly the Four Noble Truths. We can incline the mind toward noticing what's happening when I crave or cling to something. Do I see the suffering that arises? Can we let go of what's happening and realize that there is cessation to this dukkha? These are all wholesome qualities that are arising as we notice what's happening. We can see with clarity the arising and passing away of whatever it is that comes into the mind. Not to be clung to. Nothing in their nature that provides lasting peace and happiness. We can get a glimpse. We can get a glimpse into seeing the the idea of no self. This personality view can be released. Non-solidity of our sense of self. All of this moment by moment, seeing what's coming into the heart and mind. Staying with it until we see it pass. Whether what arising services, is it of service to us? Is it skillful? Does it serve us well, or do we let it go? So we have patience and perseverance. Even using our awareness of the feeling tones, we can notice constant impermanent nature. That whatever arises moment after moment, we may notice that it's pleasant or unpleasant or neutral. And the more we pay attention to the impermanence of these experiences, the less we cling on to them as being I or mine or self. So we can let go of interpreting what's happening And as we wake up again to the next moment, may we remember to hold ourselves in kindness, knowing that mindfulness in both our formal time of sitting and in our everyday lives, nurturing mindfulness and awareness with a tender-hearted kindness for ourselves. Holding ourselves in compassion when things are challenging. Holding ourselves in gentleness. Letting friendliness and goodwill be important for the softening of our hearts and minds, for the realizing of non-harming, wishing to be free from suffering, be free from internal and external dangers. And letting this sense of goodwill and kindness for ourselves also include another being, a friend or a benefactor, a child, an animal. Developing these thoughts of goodwill, of non-harming, of kindness, including others in our breath body of awareness. Using what phrases or felt sense works for you. Seeing them in gladness, being free from harm, happy and healthy. And as we gather this energy of goodwill and kindness for ourselves and for another person, may we include another being. May it be another friend or a benefactor, a teacher, someone we've gained benefit from. Seeing this person happy and healthy. Joining in our container with ourselves and the other person. Wishing them to be free from harm, free from danger. May this person have happiness, the causes of happiness. May they be free from ill will. May they live peacefully. Refreshing and renewing this care. May we begin to include others outside of our direct circle, a neutral person. Imagining this person to be happy and healthy and having ease in their lives. As we develop this friendliness toward them, letting this concentration practice build within our hearts as we allow this kindness and compassion to emanate, to include a neutral person or neutral people. Letting this kindness begin to flow to others. Animals that swim and crawl and walk and fly. Beings seen and unseen. Beings that we know or those that we don't know. May all beings everywhere have happiness, and the causes of happiness be free from harm, have ease and well-being. Just as I wish to be happy, I know that all beings wish to be happy. Anicca vata sankhara upadewaya domino upakitawa meruchanti te samvapasamo sukho. All conditioned things are subject to impermanence. They arise and pass away. And seeing this clearly with mindfulness brings the greatest happiness, which is peace. And may the benefits, this goodness that we've practiced, May it be of benefit to all beings, knowing that we've been developing non-harm for ourselves and others, and kindness for ourselves and others. Taking this in deeply, it's really important in these turbulent times, so many ups and downs, to acknowledge with gratitude that we take this time for practice, no matter what's happening in our practice. Waking up each moment, letting go of the unskillful and inclining the mind toward the skillful, holding loving kindness and compassion at our hearts as we see clearly the nature of the suffering that happens when we cling. As you gently open your eyes and look around and notice light and perception that starts happening as soon as we begin to identify something that we like or don't like when we see it or hear it. I want to check in and see how each of you are doing. And before I do, I think I'll just say a few words while we're still in this frame of being around the second noble truth of right thought or right understanding. Sometimes it's called right resolve. Having talked about right view and mentioning a little bit of it in ways during our sitting, I'll just remind us that in this step of the path, sometimes things are overlooked. I mean, actually, with right thought and right resolve, we practice generosity, and we practice loving kindness, and we practice compassion. And so this skillful intention, skillful thinking, shows us 3 positive thoughts of generosity, of letting go. That generosity or letting go is also renunciation. And there's loving friendliness, and there's compassion. And so there's a kind of, in this right thought is thoughts of renunciation around letting go of what we're clinging to, of encouraging selflessness, and having thoughts of love and thoughts of nonviolence, which goes out to all beings. We can note that these thoughts of selfless sort of detachment, love and nonviolence these are grouped on that wisdom side. These first 2 of the Eightfold Path, which sometimes are at the beginning, sometimes they're at the end. It's a cyclical path that can be done in any kind of order, but you can see that it's a wisdom to really have these noble qualities, that we let go of selfish desires and ill will and hatred and violence. And those are wisdom practices. And so in this right intention are these 3 areas: generosity or letting go, which is also considered renunciation; loving kindness, and compassion. So we can get deeply into ideas of renunciation. It happens on all kinds of levels. But one of the things that we've talked about before also is cultivating clear discernment of the kinds of thoughts that arise in our minds. And we can notice which thoughts might be rooted in desire and ill will or cruelty. And we can consciously reflect on sort of the karma that they cause, and we can let them go. And we can notice that those thoughts inclining toward renunciation, toward letting go, and toward goodwill and toward compassion, when we reflect on those, they get stronger in our lives. And all of this is wise reflection in the service of the path for ourselves. And as we become more mindful of these two kinds of thoughts, we become aware of the strength and the kind of seductive powers of the unwholesome patterns. Ill will and aversion are said to be more dangerous than greed and desire. And a little bit easier to uproot, because desire, even though it's a little less dangerous, it's harder to see and it's harder to uproot. Because ill will has these more harmful consequences, and we can always notice the unpleasantness of it, and the suffering of it is really obvious. While the sense desires, on the other hand, are usually associated with pleasure, and it's not always apparent, why renouncing them is a good idea. So, there are some stories in the suttas around people who are householders, and they indulge in sensuality and they delight and enjoy the senses. And renunciation seems like it's like a sheer drop-off. And yet, they heard in the time of the Buddha that this doctrine and this discipline around the hearts of these young monks who were joyous at the thought of renunciation, and that they grew confident and steadfast in their path of seeing it as a path of peace. But for the householders and the masses of the people, they didn't quite understand why renunciation, letting go of sense, the desires that come to the senses. And so they decided to go ask the Buddha about it. And so they went off to where the Buddha was staying. And Ananda, the Buddha's right-hand person and cousin, repeated their conversation to the Buddha. And the Buddha agreed. He said, even I myself, before my awakening, when I was still an unawakened bodhisattva, thought that renunciation was good and seclusion was good, but the heart didn't leap at this idea of renunciation, and it didn't get any confidence or didn't see the peace in it. And then the thought occurred to him, what is the cause? What's the reason? Why my heart doesn't leap at this idea of renunciation? Why doesn't it grow confident and steady? And the thought occurred to him, let me see if I can see where he said it. I think we talked about this, about the separating the thoughts. I have it in my notes. I'm going to try to find his actual response. Then the thought occurred to me, I haven't seen the drawback of sense pleasures. I haven't pursued that theme. I haven't understood the reward of renunciation. I haven't familiarized myself with it. That's why my heart doesn't leap up at renunciation, doesn't grow confident, steadfast, or firm, seeing it as peace. And he went on to say that by reflecting on the drawbacks of sense pleasures and familiarizing himself with the rewards of letting go, then there arose the possibility of his heart leaping at renunciation, growing confident and steadfast. And so it's an interesting thing to reflect on the drawbacks of sense pleasures in a way. Sometimes even when we just hear the word renunciation, it sets off these alarm bells that because we have all this association with, representation of desires with deprivation and, bleak and austere lifestyle, but more accurate and liberating understanding of letting go is more like the experience of, say, non-addiction. We know the suffering that binds up with addictions and whatever they might be. And, we might be addicted in one way or another to food or drugs or sex or alcohol, or maybe more unnoticed to work or power, recognition, wealth, even comfort. I'm one of those ones, definitely addicted to comfort. But we can become addicted not only to the gratification of our wants, wanting them to be gratified, but also, and this is what's subtle and interesting to me, is the mental habit of wanting itself. That kind of, what happens when I look at one of those ads that flows up on my Facebook feed, or something when I bought, one item that I liked, and now I get advertisements in my emails for a whole bunch of others of these items. And, if we can see this and let the grasping at it drop away, then that's letting go. That's renunciation. And meditators can get addicted to different kinds of states like rapture or calm. And how often in our practice are we trying to recreate some experience that we had before? We can get addicted to investigation or become overly fascinated with what it is that we're experiencing. So really it's wise restraint that we can use to relate to desire and to this idea of finding actual peace in letting go. That if we have wise restraint, we can see the desire that arises and pass away without feeling always the need to have this compulsive action on it. And so, sometimes it's kind of an interesting thing to pay attention to the moments when we go from being lost in wanting, lost in some enjoyment of pleasure of the senses, including mental fantasies and, being free from wanting. Notice the transition from the moment of being lost in and identified with pleasant feelings to being mindful of them. So there's a lot more to be said about renunciation, but just changing our habit patterns of seeing what arises and we might be really attached to, and noticing when we're lost in the drama of our stories, and noticing that little change in the moment of when we let go of that grasping and that clinging, and real renunciation happens by letting go, there is a little more understanding of the steadfastness and the peace that can arise from this possibility of having more stability and freedom from letting go. And that in turn is really a big act of generosity for ourselves. This renunciation is an act of generosity. I know you've heard that quote from Ajahn Chah. If you let go a little, you will have a little peace. If you let go a lot, you will have a lot of peace. If you let go completely, you will have complete peace. Your struggles with the world will have come to an end. So I want to thank you for your practice. I want to thank you for being here and for giving yourself the generosity of spending this time together. And I know we're going to lose Doug.